it'll make.
Hello, everybody.
Oh, that's
Somebody's
echo.
watching the stream at the same time.
I mean,
Because I'm hearing myself like 50 times. Wow.
I think that's on your side. You got that crazy reverb going.
Yeah, not from my side.
I have it muted, so that shouldn't do anything.
There you go. Death disappear, and
Yeah, death is gone.
yeah.
We've
Death
conquered
killed the
death.
stream.
oh my
Death
gosh,
killed the stream.
no face.
Yeah.
Oh, there we go. I guess if you just walk away, it's like that.
He was like, I gotta get my sunglasses. I'm going incognito.
All right. So, in all seriousness, basically, the idea of this stream is because a few people actually requested if we do a talk about building your own lab, whether it's at home or at work, and how to actually build cyber ranges, also even in the cloud, for the purpose of both pen testing and also the defensive side, things like malware reverse engineering or malware analysis and so on. So during DEF CON, I did a presentation in the Blue Team Village, and a whole bunch of people actually requested if there was going to be recorded. It's not going to be recorded, but we're going to record this, and as a matter of fact, it's going to be better because I brought all my friends in here, and they're going to bring a lot of the experience of what they actually do at home, how they actually prepare for certifications, for just learning, overall, and also in some cases even for doing work related stuff at home, right? And whenever I say work related stuff, in some cases maybe developing a new tool, or it may be actually augmenting some of the lab that now everybody's working from home, right? Augmenting some of the lab that we actually have from work. So there's no set agenda in here. Although what I did is I have a small list of items in here, even though it says agenda here. Let me share it. Give me 1 second. Take this out and put. So I'm repurposing a presentation that I do for O'Reilly. So I took the O'Reilly logo and put the Red Team Village in it.
Nice.
So give me 1 second. No, it was not the O'Reilly. It was my own website. But anyways, we can actually start with the basics, right? So how we do this with VirtualBox, things that you can actually even take advantage on the APIs that VirtualBox actually provide, and potentially integrating things like Vagrant, Ansible, Terraform, and VMware. Although I don't like VMware that much, I don't use it. I actually use mostly at home Proxmox, so I can actually even share a couple of clusters that I actually have here in my home. And but we actually gonna talk. We can talk about pretty much anything, right? So whenever you're building a lab related to Linux, and specifically using adapters for wireless, there are a lot of predicaments actually going to be run into, especially injecting packets into the wireless network. And because of that, a lot of people actually buy different adapters, like the alpha adapters and even the pineapples of the world. But what I want to actually show you is how you can, for free, not even worry about that if you're just getting started, and use kernel modules in Linux to basically simulate, wireless adapters. So you don't have to deal with, paying, even if it's $40, $30, that those adapters actually cost. But you can actually do this for free. And then at the same time, we can actually go over how to build some of this stuff in the cloud. I actually have a couple of examples on how to build a cyber range in Google Cloud and in AWS, and how to actually export a VirtualBox VM to actually make it work in Google Cloud, and how to use Kubernetes and so on. And as a matter of fact, that's what I would love to. For Chris McCoy has a lot of experience with Kubernetes, and actually he uses it extensively even at home. So some of those conversations, and then probably spend some time on automation, right? So how to automate things in the cloud with Terraform. I have a couple of references in here that you can actually do that, and even in Azure to do Active Directory setups for both defensive and offensive. And in a lot of cases, actually, it's more in the offensive side, right? So for pen testing, but you can do that for both purposes. And then at the end, basically, probably spend some time on malware analysis. I have a couple of references where you can actually download malware, but some of the best practices on what to do whenever you're actually doing a lab, whether it's at home or at work, for malware analysis, right? And the things not to do, the malpractices of not to do. But at any rate, what I want to do is I see a couple of people that already joined and they're in the chat right now. If you have any other questions or ideas of topics that we can actually, cover here today, please also let us know, right? I'm going to pause for now. Any other comments, Chris, Omar, or Oskari?
I was just going to say that, the things going back into the wireless hacking, what's really amazing about some of these things is like, let's say you're in Google Cloud. I mean, you're not going to have a way of really playing around with wireless interfaces, or AWS, you won't have a way of playing around with wireless interfaces, but it's literally a mod probe command away, and you can have as many wireless radios as you want. You can have as many APs as you want. You can do, and what's really amazing is they act exactly like the real thing. You can actually tune them to a certain frequency. And if they're not on the right frequency, they don't see each other. It's pretty cool the way they work. I mean, we've done some labs with them with one of the classes that I teach with Omar as well at work, and it just works great. So,
as a matter of fact, we can probably start with that. And what I'm doing is I'm pasting a link to a GitHub repository that actually Chris and me and a few folks, contribute to. And in there, I actually have that one command. And Chris is actually absolutely right. If you go under wireless resources, and by the way, there's about, 8,000 different resources in here and sample code that I put in there for other like courses, video books, and blah, blah, blah. But on the wireless resources, in there, you actually see virtual adapters. And under there, this is the command, basically. Mobprobe Mac 802.11 _ hardware sim. And what that will do is that, right now, prior to actually invoking that command, let me actually put this in here. You only have one interface, right? Ethernet 0. After invoking that command, now you actually have two wireless interfaces, and one of them you can actually put host APD and basically create your own access point, and the other one use it as a client, and then have Kali or Parrot or any other, Linux distribution that you like Black Arch or any other ones, and then perform any of these attacks. And I have an example of, of course, it's only apt install host APD. It's pretty simple, but there are a few things that you may run with Kali, and I have a few things in here for troubleshooting on how you can potentially, bypass some of that, or at least fix some of those issues. And then, run things like aircrackng and have how to install a DHCP server. And under...
What did you use for a DHCP server there, Omar?
Typically, what I do is DNS mask in many cases. Yeah. It all depends, but that's probably my go-to one. How about you?
I actually do use that, and sometimes I'll use ISC DHCP, the full-blown thing, just to play around with it. It's just because it's what I've been comfortable with. But yeah, IP, mask or a DNS mask is really nice. And my big exposure, lightweight, yeah, my big exposure to it is when you use OpenStack, which we're talking about VMware earlier. If it's a container, or not, if it's a container, I use Kubernetes. If it's a VM, more than likely I'll either use KVM with QEMU directly, or I'll use OpenStack. And OpenStack is they use DNS mask for its own internal addressing. So it's pretty common. You see it all over the place, used all over the place.
I agree. And talking about that, basically I have an example of the host APD file in there, and you can see that the passphrase is Omar sucks in there. But feel free to actually grab that, right? It's extremely simple. It's one command away, as Chris mentioned, and a configuration of host APD, and pretty much you have your one VM wireless hacking, I guess, environment. Or it doesn't have to be for wireless hacking. It can be for anything, right? So a good one. I guess from here we can actually scratch things, right? Like, don't do that anymore. But I think that we can probably do is going down the list and see how people, how you create your own labs at work or at home. And I'll start with Omar. Um, are there any specific environments that you like the best? And as a matter of fact, let me stop sharing so people can see you instead of me.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I'm a big proponent of VirtualBox. It's the simplest one to start getting used to. The networking can be a bit of a challenge sometimes if you're not sure what you're doing, but there's plenty of documentation and help guides to help you get to that point. My experience is mostly through development, so I'm building applications, and I'd like to have one application be able to talk to another one if they're on two different systems. And so I'll either I need to have both of those VMs on the same network in order to have that communication there. So VirtualBox makes that very easy. But since I do a lot more stuff on Linux, then I'm using KVM and I'm using QEMU to do that as well. So that one is a lot more hands-on, and I kind of prefer that over VirtualBox if I'm on Linux. But then I also am able to use Vagrant, which if I connect that either to KVM, or if I connect that over to VirtualBox, it's essentially just a wrapper for all the command line tools, or the command line commands that you would use in order to manage your virtual machines, your networks, the number of CPUs, your RAM, all of that stuff. And so Vagrant, along with VirtualBox, for me, makes development really easy if I'm developing into a virtual machine, because I can share my code base on my host, and that folder is also going to be shared somewhere in the file system of the VM. And using Vagrant allows me to very quickly to spin something up with a very simple configuration file. And then also, if I need to have multiple VMs, I can use that single configuration file to configure those different VMs, and also configure the network connections between those VMs, assign IP addresses, all of that. So that's usually the direction I go with, either if that's a VirtualBox as their hypervisor, or KVM as a hypervisor.
Okay, perfect. Oskari, how about you?
I mean, I just like to fire up a bunch of virtual machines on my desktop and use VMware, because I've had problems with VirtualBox where I can't like allocate a piece of all my CPU cores to it. But with VMware, I can just be like, all right, you get 8 threads, and I can do that for all my VMs. And I haven't had any problems with the networking on VMware. It's pretty easy to create just a new virtual network there through the network editor or whatever they call it.
And actually, there's a question coming in saying, I'm assuming the methods you speak involve a lot of coding experience. And at least from my side is no. Yep. So I think everybody's actually shaking their heads at no.
Yeah, not at all. I mean, so for coding and doing infrastructure are two different things. Now, when you're coding, you're either scripting, you're building software, editing software, or building some sort of tool. But when you're talking about using like a hypervisor like VirtualBox, VMware, KVM, all of those, you don't need coding experience, because you're not actually coding anything. You're just messing with configuration and spinning things up, allocating resources. So you won't need to worry about learning how to code. Is there a way for me to join this talk? Yes, by sending us messages in the chat. That's the way to do it.
Nice.
How about you, Sirox?
He messaged in Discord that he's in a pretty loud environment, so it'll be hard to talk, but he uses VMware for labs, but also ESXi and vSphere, sometimes VirtualBox, but tries to do everything in VMware.
So quick question. I think, so since he has like a very loud background and he can't really talk, he can just show us his face in front of this beautiful window here. I think what he can do is he can express his ideas simply through interpretive dance. So I think he has to wiggle, he has to jiggle, he has to show us how the VMs work, like all of that put together.
How do you plug in two VMs together? You have to actually animate it.
Yeah, you have to not like that. Not like that. This is a family-friendly show, you motherfucker.
Oh my god.
You really like VMware. You like ESXi. You really like, man.
Okay.
I just find VMware to be more solid as a product than VirtualBox.
VMware is great. I actually do use VMware Fusion at work quite a bit. And what's really nice about Fusion is that you can actually plug into a full-blown ESXi cluster with vCenter and all that stuff. And you could actually use your virtual machine in the cluster remotely, and you can actually have everything on the screen, on your own machine. And I do admit, it is really nice. One of the things I hate about VMware is installing for my SOs.
That's my go-to method. I never import virtual machines.
I hate it because, well, I don't like importing virtual machines either. I'm a little bit more of a nerd when it comes to virtual machines. I have a really huge setup at home and also at work where I could pixie boot whatever VM I want and then get it installed, and then I use Cloud Init on top of that to set everything up. So yeah, I'm a little bit more complex because I like having everything set up for me. And what's really nice about Cloud Init is that once you do things in that, it can be transferred anywhere. It can go into any cloud.
Yeah.
You can do. So I really like that part.
It's just funny that he's in a room full of nerds. He's like, I'm a bit of a virtual machine nerd.
Yeah, well,
It's like, oh, so that's what your nerddom is.
yeah. I'm a container nerd too. So.
Have you seen my VMware snapshot trees? They get pretty insane sometimes.
Oh man, have you ever had to actually collapse those? I think at work we had a few of these that had snapshots that were like 4 or 5 years old.
Oh no.
And we had to, so that means that everything that got everything that got written to the disk from that point basically got forked off, and it ended up turning into this huge mess that took like a week to collapse down.
Damn.
I'm not saying that I'm really all that proud of having VMs that are like that many years old.
No, but it makes it really nice for like when you're testing stuff out, you can just quickly roll back to a known good configuration.
Yeah.
So for those of you that like VMware, I'm going to show you something that probably will sell you not to. And whenever I say sell you something, it's free, right? This is what I use at home. This is actually one of my home setups.
Ew, a web interface?
Wow, you even have SSL or TLS and everything.
Yeah,
is it self-signed?
It is pretty powerful, and it's Let's Encrypt. But at any rate, you can actually have clusters with Ceph, with GlusterFS, with ZFS, and these are glorified PCs, and some use servers that are bought, from like Amazon or eBay. And one of them in here, actually, in this one has a NUC, an Intel NUC. And a couple of the other clusters that what I have is actually Intel NUCs. And I saw the comment from Samuel that's saying, that basically he's using pfSense to divide the network and everything else. That's what I do here. In some environments, we have very quick pfSense automated topologies that you can actually do with Ansible or basically with the same infrastructure or Proxmox and build a topology, 20 VMs, 15 networks if you wanted to, in basically completely automated, and it's free. And I don't know why you said that you have problems with networking on VirtualBox. I never actually have major problems, but yeah, in order to scale and actually do something like Open vSwitch, which actually I'm running here, and then putting Open vSwitch to do mirroring and port monitoring interfaces for things like Security Onion or Snort, Suricata, Bro, things like that. It's actually fairly powerful.
Open vSwitch can do that. Can do port monitoring too.
Yeah. Actually, I put an article, I guess. Let me actually see if I can find it. And it's basically, it's right here. This is what you have to do. This is one environment, and all this is actually you can actually automate the whole thing, right? Build up all the infrastructure, all these, web servers and things like Infection Monkey and put Caldera, Atomic Red Team, things like that, all automated. And what you have to do, this is Open vSwitch. Of course, you create a bridge, and then you have to actually find the VM ID within Proxmox, and of course it's through a CLI. Even though you're seeing and Oskari was saying, no, GUI, but most of the operations you can do actually through the CLI. And basically, you find the VLAN ID and you associate that to a mirror interface. And then you can actually have, all that, sending, think about like putting your own Gigamon, but in this case with Open vSwitch, and collecting packet captures and sending it to things like actually the new Security Onion 2.0, which actually is not released yet, but they did a release candidate the other day. They actually have an amazing tool for pickup analysis and so on. And I'm testing it right now with another cluster that I have at home. But anyways, you can do things like that. And of course, this is well with a snort and getting pretty graphics with Elasticsearch and Grafana and stuff like that. But yeah, it's actually pretty powerful, Chris.
Nice.
Oh,
And the other
look,
cool
there's
thing
some
is
nice
not in it.
spam in chat.
I'm sorry?
There's some nice spam in chat.
Yeah.
Great.
It wouldn't be a red team stream if someone wasn't spamming us. But hey, why do you have 4 CPUs in your Proxmox?
I'm gonna spam myself.
You don't get level up for spamming in here.
Yeah. Hey, Omar, you asked a question.
Yeah, I was going to ask you why you have so many CPUs for your PF Sense. Do you get a lot of internet? Are you using a lot of traffic in there, or because you have 4 CPUs in there, dedicated CPUs?
Yeah, this one I sometimes pump traffic. I don't do it anymore. To be honest with you, it's me lazy. Created a template and basically I just cloned it from a template that I have, and I only did that. Let me show you another one. Let's see. The typical. I guess I don't have it here. Nope. But the typical pfSense deployment that I do in something like this is probably like 2 CPUs the most, and like 4 gigs of RAM. I mean, and believe me, you're not gonna need it, right?
Yeah.
I have a Meraki box and a pfSense box also as like more primary firewalls in the home, and the pfSense, I have 4 gigs of RAM and sorry, I have 8 gigs of RAM, and probably the most is like 2 used, right? And CPU is just an old i5 that I have, in an old
Okay.
and it's super, unused, like 0.3% all the time. Right?
Yeah.
And I have a gigabit Ethernet connection to the internet.
Oh, cool.
I've always found that whenever you make a VM, you want to have at least 2 virtual CPUs in it, because if you ever have a process that runs away on you and you have to like break it or control C it, it's a lot easier to do that when you have 2 CPUs than having just 1.
Yeah.
The other option is Magic Sysrec, but good luck punching that in a VM.
Yeah. There are ways of doing that too. Like
There is, but
print screen and
VMs normally are a bit iffier when it comes to fancy keyboard input.
The other thing that I like about this is the LXC containers, and you're gonna laugh, but in some cases, because it's so fast and easy to create a container, I have something like this. Actually, let me log out.
CDE accountant.
I have a Docker inside of LXC. So if you look in here, yeah. And the reason for that is because it's, the analogy of the cattle and the pet, right? So the VMs, take a little bit more time, and everything else. I put an LXC container and I do 50 at a time and put a whole bunch of containers and set up in a lab in like no time.
How exactly are you accessing the Docker daemon in LXC? Are you, do you have it running on the host, or do you have the daemon running in LXC itself?
No, in LXC itself.
Did you bind mount the Docker daemon socket, or are you just binding it to like localhost or something?
Yeah. So basically, in LXC, it's, I'm running Debian in this case, right? So, and then in Debian, I'm installing Docker through Cloudinit, right? So like whenever I instantiate the container, actually not Cloudinit, this is actually with the Proxmox itself. Cloudinit only use it for VMs only. But in this one, basically I install Docker and I have a plain vanilla, thing, and it's just running Docker, right? It's like a zip inside of a zip file. Yeah, and it works actually really amazing. Don't do it at home, right? This is convenience and like disposable crap. But but it's a matter of, and actually some of these, like I can put, I don't know, and this one I have like 128 gigs of RAM or something. Not the container, but in the system. And
No, just the container.
It works flawlessly, man. I have one running Yeti right now that it has a Docker Compose. Let's see, which one is it? Yes, right here. And as a matter of fact, I actually have it right here. It's running multiple Mongo databases. It's actually running Yeti, getting threat intelligence feeds, all that in a container inside, actually a whole bunch of containers inside of a container. So,
Oh, dog.
Yeah.
I heard you like containers in your containers.
yeah. But again, it's a lab, right? I mean, this is not to put in production and everything else. It's just if you want to do a quick check, might as well, spin this up and delete it afterwards. So again, don't do that at home. Don't do as I say, or don't do as I do. Do as I say.
Yeah, this stream is not for giving people good advice.
Yeah, we're red teamers. We're not blue teamers. We're not really armoring ourselves very well.
Yeah, just use the same password for every VM, and like even the master password should be the same as everything else, because it's all about simplicity. You want to get to your VMs fast, and so does everybody else.
Well, that kind of brings up the same thing about passwords too, right? Is that how do you log into some? I mean, it looks like when you have Proxmox, you've got this really nice console, but a lot of times when you're logged in for maybe VMware, ESXi, or if you're or if you're even in the cloud, a lot of times you have to do not certificates, but like SSH, like you have to secure shell in, and you really don't want to have your stuff open with just passwords to the internet, especially. So
yeah.
You have to have some way. You have the kind of the chicken
key.
Yeah, you have some kind of a chicken and the egg problem, right? Where you have to get that SSH authorized key file put on your machine, and normally that's what CloudNet does. When you run that, when you're connected. If you've ever heard about people where they do server-side request forgery and they grab information from the local metadata server at AWS, that's actually the server that provides that key. Is that when that machine connects up, it's brought up, you run CloudNet connects to the metadata server, downloads a whole bunch of stuff, and then sets your machine up. And
actually, talking about that, so what do you use for CloudNet for your keys? Do you put them in GitHub and then they download it, or Launchpad, or?
We just put them in GitHub because a lot of times all of the things are signed and they're not sensitive. I mean, especially if you're using a good, solid SSH public key. And the private key is, let's say, saved on one of these things like YubiKey, where you have one of these things. You can actually put SSH private keys, or you can generate them on here and then use them with your agent, an SSH agent, and then use that to log into your VMs. And the reason why we put them in Git is because they're public keys. You could sign those Git commits, so you can see as things change over time, who's added to what. And then if you got like a bunch of commits, maybe one is not signed, then that's something you can go back and look at. And that's what we use. I think it's a lot easier to do that kind of thing rather than just worrying about passwords and worrying about hashes and whether or not that hash is going to leak and whether or not somebody's going to crack it. Just use public key auth.
Yep.
Yeah.
Plus a second method of authentication. And I see a couple of questions coming in. I wonder what is the cheapest Proxmox setup is. Probably an old PC. Just get an old PC that you don't have it. It says without eBay.
One of those old Dell towers everyone has around somewhere.
Yeah. And you will be surprised. Chris and I don't know, probably about a year ago, I'm actually going to give it to another friend of ours, Desync. But we bought a couple of servers in Amazon that are called Renewed. But all these very large financial services companies that they change servers like underwear, you're going to find a lot of really amazing deals. I think that we bought one RU Dell server. I put 192 gigs of RAM on it, but I think it came with that 68 or 64. And we bought it for like $250 or something like that, right? So,
Nice.
So if you want to like scale super badly, I mean, you can find some deals, with old servers that will last you for another 5-10 years, right?
Yeah, I mean, whether Intel likes it or not, Moore's law has pretty much been dead for the last 4 or 5 years. The only thing that they've been doing has just been increasing core counts.
Yep.
So a lot of these servers that you're going to buy on the the gray market or black, the used market,
The black market.
black, oh, not black. Thanks, man. Yeah, no,
So
I
he
would.
was
Yeah,
saying,
no, gray market, or just basically buying through AWS. A lot of them really perform well. They may really suck down the power, but yeah,
if you can set it up in a dorm room, because you normally have unlimited electricity.
yeah.
Yes, because all of us are still in college.
Well, some people in chat might be.
They
Yeah, but
might be.
as far as equipment, man, you just get on Amazon and just look, type in like Dell Renewed or something like that. The R720, 710, they're great little machines.
Yeah, and there's also some companies out there that what they do is they will pretty much take any donated computer that's given to them, or they'll go to companies that are like closing down their offices, or they're just trying to liquidate some of their assets, and they'll just resell those PCs. They'll restore them, make sure they're clean and all that, and then they will go ahead and just flip them and sell them for a small profit. But like I've seen laptops on their website for like $20, $30, $130, like towers for like $200, $150, like really inexpensive. Like they're older machines. I mean, you're not going to be playing Crisis on them, but you are going to be able to run some VMs. You are going to be able to get some containers on there. You are going to get the performance that you need in order to run these labs. Because what you're optimizing for is cost versus, and also value. You're not necessarily optimizing for performance. And at some of the things that you'll be doing, performance isn't necessarily going to be a concern, because it's not like you're simulating the internet, right? You're simulating a very small amount of traffic or getting data that isn't going to be incredibly overwhelming, right? You're not a data center. You are a small shop, and you're just trying to learn. And that's really the key factor here. Don't go broke trying to learn.
Yep. Actually,
put that on a t-shirt.
2 things coming in the chat. One is, and I forgot about that one. That is an amazing resource. It's a subreddit called Home Lab Sales.
Oh, yeah.
Where people actually like that. And then the other one was a question: what do you guys use for shared storage across VMs? So I can share some of mine, but anybody want to go first?
So the easiest way to do shared storage across VMs is, if you're doing ESXi or something like that, is just use NFS, it's network file system. Yeah. You'll have like a server that's set aside just for doing NFS. Now, if you really want to get fancy, you can do things like Gluster and Ceph. Ceph is, oh my God, Ceph is probably one of the most amazing products as far as storage is concerned. It's basically, you could think of Ceph as being this layer that sits in between your virtual machine and your hard disk, and it takes a whole bunch of hard disks and it makes those available, and it does cloning by itself. It can do backups. It can do replication. So if you wanted to replicate a hard disk off-site, and so that way you have like an off-site backup of all your stuff. Ceph does all that natively, and on top of that, that's where you would run your ZFS or ext4 file system or whatever it is you happen to you like. And yeah, from what I understand, Proxmox has it built in. Yeah,
So I'm a Proxmox fanboy.
Yep.
I couldn't tell.
Yeah, because it's free. It's free. You can pay for the subscription thing, but it's free. So, and I don't like VMware. But at any rate,
you aren't the only one.
Storage in here. What I do in this cluster, this is like super lab. I don't care about this cluster. A type of thing. I just do ZFS and I mount to NFS. And what you see down below here, all the DO4T, 500 SSD, all these is mostly NFS mounts. And POS is not piece of shit. It's actually Poseidon is the name of the server that I have here. That's a big storage server that I have a whole bunch of ZFS storage. And if you go to data center and you go to summary, right now is 132 terabytes of storage in there. So it's all shared. I'm on this one. I have a nicer one that is actually running Ceph. And the cool thing about this one is actually you can go under storage for the whole cluster and add a new cluster FS or Ceph. And Ceph is actually installed through Nautilus, or I don't know if I'm pronouncing it correctly, but it's basically a wrapper utility that actually will install it. And believe me, whenever I installed Ceph from the beginning, I sweated and I cried a lot. It was hard.
It is hard,
It's a
but
lot better now.
I will tell you that I have been running Ceph for 7 years, 6 years, something like that, and I have never lost 1 byte of data.
Yep.
If you have it set up properly with the right amount of what are called monitors, that are basically monitors are kind of like your treasure map. They're the one that says, okay, this is where, at a very high level, this is where your data is located. Now, one of the things that's really neat about Ceph is that you don't have this controller, so to speak, that you go through. All of the machines that are connecting into a Ceph cluster can independently be able to tell by connecting to the monitor and say, give me a little bit of high level information. That's one of the things that the guy that came up with Ceph, that was like his college, I think it was either a thesis or it was a dissertation. And it was basically how you actually make a cluster of hard disks without having a central point where you have to go through and query. And it's just amazing technology. And what's really neat about it is it has replication in it, so you'll always have multiple copies of your data. And also, if it ever gets in trouble, one of the things the thing does is it freezes. It basically stops everything across the entire board. It just says, something's wrong, something's really screwed up, stop, and it freezes everything. And so that's why sometimes you have to go dig it in and find out, okay, what happened? Did the monitor lose its marble? Would one monitor lose its marble? Usually what happens is when you have 2 monitors go bad, it freezes. It basically goes into read-only mode. So you could still get all your data off the thing and just you can't write to it. And anyway, there's one of the reasons why these very large, corporations like Rackspace use, so I don't know if Rackspace uses Ceph, but most OpenStack deployments that are private cloud use Ceph. Almost, like over 60% of them do it.
Someone in chat just mentioned something that I just completely forgot about. Hyper-V. I know we're talking about Linux, but like Hyper-V. I was like, oh, I completely forgot about Windows virtualization. And like Windows does also containers too now.
Really?
Yeah, when you can do like Windows, you can have a window container, right?
I mean, I'm still running Windows 7, so I wouldn't know.
And is a Windows container the same as a Linux container on Windows? You know how when you run Docker, they got like Docker for Mac or Docker desktop, where you have that thing where you have Docker when you're running, but when you actually spin something up, it's in Linux. It's not actually in.
CDocs hates Hyper-V.
Yeah, he hates Hyper-V.
Fuck Hyper-V. All my homies hate Hyper-V.
I have never played with Hyper-V. I don't have a clue how to use it or how to set it up.
I don't have it there. Whenever you mention a container for Windows or a Windows container, I was just figuring a box where you actually throw away your Windows system, and that's your container.
like that GIF of Ron Swanson like looking at his computer, looking really upset, and then just throwing the computer in the dumpster.
I mean, the first thing that comes to mind when I think of containers is Cubes OS.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
You're talking about the one where every program you run like spins up in its own
in a container,
in its own environment, and then it has some way of connecting the GUIs together. I've never played with it. I've always
you can create like
it,
sandbox groups or whatever. Like certain things can communicate together.
Yeah, and I think it even has a way that if if it does like this copy on write thing, whenever you write over some file, it doesn't. It doesn't actually update the real file. It just makes that version of that environment look like that file's been updated. But when you wipe it and blow it away, you can bring it back up and everything is all back to normal again.
Speaking of copy on write, I use BTRFS on my laptop, which I found to be a lot of fun because it's because you've got all the built-in support for like snapshots and stuff, so you can take a snapshot of your drive and keep it somewhere, and then just something breaks, you can just revert the snapshot.
I just think it's so funny how religious people are getting about their hypervisors. Like even in chat, and it's like Hyper-V is trash. No, I like VirtualBox. VirtualBox is trash, and you're trash too. Like all of that.
Let's
You're
just
wrong.
let's just say computing is just trash. We should restart computing.
The internet was a mistake, and you know it.
If you're on the internet right now, you should be ashamed of yourself.
Yeah. Why is this happening right now? Why are we on here? We're a bunch of hypocrites.
We can talk about Vim versus Emacs.
Oh, that's a great conversation. Let's start that. Let's
Are
do
there
that.
are there
They're
any
both pretty
Emacs
good.
users here?
Google Cloud versus AWS,
or Azure. Someone's like, I like Azure. And like,
or we're sponsored by AWS.
I sometimes wonder if Azure is really built on Hyper-V, because I've heard I've heard a lot of people say that Hyper-V is not stable, but yet you got AWS. I mean, you got Azure rather, not AWS. You got Azure rather, and it stays up, and you got things that are stay up forever. So I don't know what the deal is.
The only thing
Azure
I
is
know
just
about
a fork of AWS.
the only thing I know about Azure is when back in I don't know, 6 years ago or 5 or 6 years ago, there was like a bunch of guides on how to use the Azure free trials to mine Bitcoin and Dogecoin.
I mean, those are legitimate uses.
That's the only thing I've ever read about Azure, really.
But I can tell you this much: as a developer, I'm not a .NET developer, but I know a lot of .NET developers, and they absolutely love Azure for the tooling that they have on there, the features that they have specifically for development. The way I tend to look at the different cloud platforms is how that helps me be more productive as a developer. AWS has like the most tools. Like their catalog is just enormous. It's so confusing, but they have more, like if I want to get like an EC2, if I want to use their container registry, if I want to use their implementation of Kubernetes, whatever they're doing. Whereas
you can sign up for the Quantum trial.
Yeah. And then they have but the way that the name products, the way that you work with AWS, those tools have gotten better over time. But to me, it's always felt like AWS was built by network administrators for network administrators, whereas GCP and Azure were built for developers. And the way that they try to at least market their services is usually towards development, because that's what really kind of drives, not really drives, but it's a big portion of a lot of these cloud sales go to. The same thing with DigitalOcean. DigitalOcean is like very developer friendly, and the way they did that was really by allowing the community to create guides on how do you install Python on CentOS 7, how do you run a HTTPD server on Fedora, or whatever other type of thing there, right?
DigitalOcean also has a pretty solid API that you can manage your stuff with.
Absolutely, yeah. So does Google Cloud too, and I mean pretty much all the cloud providers do now. But the way that I like the way that Google Cloud has implemented their tooling for developers as well as their API, and then on the AWS side, it has the way I see it is it's a bit more mature type tooling for that type of API work. If you want to spin something up through their API, and it's a lot more pervasive too, because you can probably find a library that will work with AWS in pretty much any language that's out there. But yeah, I mean, I think the way I look at clouds basically just pick your poison. Yeah. Like if you want a particular set of tools and this one has them, go all in that direction. But a lot of companies these days are doing multi-cloud. Like they're on 3 or 4 different clouds now, and that's not necessarily shadow IT or shadow cloud IT, but it's just sometimes you just need the features of a particular one, or the availability, or the region, or something like that, whatever that the use case might be. And I went on a tangent, but Hyper-V sucks.
I got there was actually a really good use case that I ran into recently on why would you use Azure over something like AWS. And one of the things Azure has is Office 365.
Oh,
if you've ever used Office 365 is it's a kick-ass product. I don't have any other way to say it. Microsoft, you really knocked it out of the park with Office 365. It is amazing. And it going from Google Docs or box or something like that to Office 365 is like night and day.
It's
It
like
is
it's the most fully featured online Office suite.
Yeah, it is just amazing. And what is really neat about it is Azure has ties into Office 365. So you can do things like, I want to go through all of the emails that are in some account somewhere, and I want to pick out keywords from them or do something like that. And where I had seen this used was it was used for online filtering of spam, is they basically would get a whole bunch of metadata out of the contents of the email, and then they would ship that to another cloud, give it a verdict, thumbs up, thumbs down, and thumbs down, they'd delete it. So it's just something else. Anyway, yeah, talk about a tangent.
No, actually, so it's not a tangent. And as a matter of fact, I'm going to probably share this with everybody here. Talking about cloud environments, building your own lab in there, in some cases, actually, it's a personal preference, right? In other ones, is how cheap they are versus the other one. And whenever it comes to actually professional labs, so building something for your own environment, what I have seen with Azure is that a lot of people that already have applications based on Microsoft in the enterprise, it's a lot easier for them to migrate to the cloud. But at any rate, outside of that, I'm pasting again the link to that GitHub repository that we mentioned. I was actually talking to Jason literally, I don't know, it was Thursday, and he had a project. So Jason Onstrom, and by the way, if you're actually listening, kudos. Basically, he had a project before that was under a different name, but he actually just named it Purple Cloud. And what it is a whole bunch of different Terraform scripts and automated environment that you can actually put Active Directory in Azure, right? And it's completely automated, and basically you create your own cyber range. At the same time, there is the university in upstate New York, CUNY, I guess, they actually have a cyber range that they completely do it in AWS, and they use that for students.
Nice.
And of course, if you deploy this, you're going to pay a lot of money, right? I won't ever say a lot of money. Of course, you use it for a couple of days and you take it down, but don't leave it up running all the time.
Use spot instances.
Yeah. But at any rate, they actually have from malware analysis to pen testing to DFIR for reverse engineering, all that actually basically with just running a script. Right? So that's all in that GitHub repository that I just pasted there.
Nice.
Yeah.
We got the red team baby back.
Nice.
Hello, red team baby.
Say hi, Jade.
Hello.
One day she'll look back and be like,
Syracuse.
"Oh
yeah.
no!"
I know. She'll be like, Dad, I thought you deleted those VODs.
Dad, those are on Twitch. Oh my
Yeah.
god, that's
Well,
like
she's old enough.
Facebook for
I know,
old
it's like-
people with videos.
Exactly.
No, I just
Like whatever comes next.
whatever comes after it. It's like, oh,
Fidget.
that's
I don't
still
even know.
it's like MySpace for videos.
Yeah.
Hey, MySpace is still around. There's a bunch of like really small European musicians that use MySpace.
And those are the best musicians.
Mm.
All right. What else was
They're
on?
saying hi to your daughter.
Yeah. Say hi. Say hi to the chat, Jade.
Hello.
Can we get an F in chat for silence?
No, I was gonna say, like, can we get some baby rage in the chat, please? Just need some of that baby rage.
So is it still just spam, or are we actually getting some legitimate
No, we're getting
questions?
a lot of
Oh,
questions.
that's actual
a lot of
content
really good
now.
chatter.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Oh, a
Someone
lot,
asked a
yeah.
question like, what was the difference between DigitalOcean and AWS, GCP, Azure? And I think the best way to answer that is DigitalOcean runs on AWS. So
Really?
yeah, for a lot of stuff that they'll do, like when they release like their buckets feature, and that's basically just S3 buckets. So
Oh, wow.
but so what the DigitalOcean is, it is essentially a provider that gives you a virtual machine for you to mess with, and there's like pre-installed type of templates that you can use. Like if you want to like a WordPress site they have a template there for you. You just, everything's already installed, everything's ready to go. You can just start working from there. And they have a ton of other like open source applications, chat apps, what have you. And if you just want like a blank slate, if you just want a server with an operating system on it, they'll provide that to you. Whereas GCP, Azure, and AWS, they are a cloud provider where they have a ton of tools, like a metric poop ton. I have to say poop because I have young ears here. That, like, for example, if you want to run a database server, right, but you don't want to have to maintain it, well, there's RDS on AWS, for example. You can use that service to provide that those features for you to provide that database, but you yourself do not have to actively maintain that database, if that makes sense. I mean, of course, you have to maintain the database, but it's not like you're having to, keep a server up and that's under your control. They have a service that will allow you to do that.
Yeah, they provide like an endpoint. You just connect to that. You connect to that IP address, that port, and then you're good to go. And
that's right.
The API is the same as, in other words, I think RDS has several different ways that it can present itself to you. It can say, oh, I want to be MySQL compatible or MariaDB compatible. And then I think there might even be, they might have even added Oracle to just, poke somebody in the eye. But yeah.
So there were long threads about, does DigitalOcean really runs on top of AWS? So the co-founder of DigitalOcean on November 9, 2017, actually put an official statement. We do not use AWS for customer-facing products, but we use it for other purposes in here. And the DigitalOcean cloud computing platform is entirely running on our own servers. So apparently it was actually a pretty big debate.
Yeah.
They do have like their own servers. That's true. Yeah. They have data centers in San Francisco, in New York, I think they're in a few other places around the world, Singapore. So they're available all over the place, but they're not as pervasive as AWS or Google or Azure.
But DigitalOcean is pretty inexpensive. Like $5 a month, you get the most basic one.
Yeah.
It's easy to get started.
Yeah, so I was wrong. I will say that I was wrong. They don't just run on AWS, but they do use some AWS sources.
Well,
the CIA runs on AWS.
Of course they do.
They kept going into like an argument after he published this of people actually putting DNS names and everything of the DigitalOcean infrastructure on AWS. So it may be that actually portions of it are in there.
That's really funny.
A big debate. I didn't even know that.
I wouldn't be surprised if part of it was.
Yeah, I mean, pretty much everything, Netflix runs on AWS and
they have their own edge devices, but
did you guys know that YouTube used to run on Rackspace?
I think I recall seeing that.
Yeah. Rackspace lost YouTube because of poor customer service.
That's ironic.
That and getting bought by Google and all that, too.
Yeah, this was before. This was before that. This is like right before that happened.
So
isn't that
another
wild?
question that came in, and I lost it there. What kind of automation do you guys use for your VMs? There are a couple of people already saying Ansibles with just writing playbooks. Other ones, Vagrant. So I guess we can go down the list. What do you guys use for automation?
Ansible.
Yeah. So when I started, first thing we started with was Puppet, with my job, and then we went to Chef with my job. And one of the things that just drove me crazy about both of those is that you had to have a master. You had to have the system you connect to. That and usually that wasn't free. That usually cost money. And one of the things, though, that's really nice about Ansible is that you don't have that. It's you could, if you wanted to have, and I think you can even do it standalone with Chef too. You can use Chef Solo. Well, I don't know what they're calling it nowadays, but basically Ansible is kind of a Swiss Army knife. It does a whole bunch of things. As a matter of fact, I just had a problem today where I had Kubernetes containers. And I had a whole bunch of containers that all had the same label, and I needed to somehow kill them all off at the same time. what was I going to use? In an automated fashion, I ended up using Ansible for that. I went out, I connected with Ansible. They have some modules like Kate's Info and Kate's, and I just said, hey, Kate's Info, give me all of the containers with this label in this network namespace. And then I used Kate's, and I just basically deleted all of them. And then, of course, with Kubernetes, it's pets and cattle again. If you delete a pod, it'll get respawned back up again. The controller manager notices and then signals the scheduler, and the scheduler says, "Oh, we need to set things up." So yeah, Ansible is great for automation. That's what I pretty much use. Cloud in it
You,
too.
Omar.
Yeah, Ansible. And if I have to do any sort of automation, I would do it with Ansible. Writing playbooks is not incredibly difficult. There's really great documentation, and it's also Red Hat. Now it's a Red Hat product, and they're supporting that. And I'm a big fan of Red Hat. I really like what they do. I support what they do, and I like how they support open source. And so, yeah, Ansible all the way.
How about you, Oskari?
I mean, I was recently playing around with manually creating pre-seeded Debian ISOs.
Oh my God. Oh my God. I just feel for you. Oh.
It was fun. It was fun. I liked it.
Have you ever had to set up hard disk partitioning with Debian pre-seeds? Like, have you ever actually, you had multiple hard disks and you had to set them up and do like volume groups and logical volumes? It is a nightmare. It is so awful. It is so bad. So I eventually.
This guy's like, do you breathe manually?
Only when I think about it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Another thing that's really nice about Ansible too is you can do networking configuration with it. It has all the things for doing firewalls, and it has the things for doing, if you have the really expensive gear like the Cisco gear and the Juniper gear, you can even do netconf and do all kinds of configurations. It has tie-ins with, what's the Napalm? If you've ever heard of Napalm, it has ties into that to do networking configuration. Ansible is just something else.
I just like getting my hands dirty and figuring out how everything that gets done behind the scenes.
Yeah, that's one of the reasons why I haven't gone down the whole road of doing proxy.
I have done Linux from scratch.
I
have done Linux from scratch, which is why I'm now running Gentoo on my laptop, because I was like, I really like this. I just don't want to write a package manager right now.
I would just absolutely, if anybody has never done Linux from scratch before, do it. Go ahead, and you don't even have to they have like several different versions of it where you can get like GUIs and environments. But if you've never set up an actual Linux machine from scratch before, actually creating the build chain, the tool chains, you will learn so much about how Linux actually works. And if you can do Linux from scratch, you can do anything. You'll be a kick-ass admin for the rest of your life.
I'm no longer scared of hunting down dependencies and running
configure and make. You know what the LD library path looks like. You know where all the linkers and loaders. You know where all that stuff is stored. You know what you might even learn like what an R path is on a binary. So it's like there is just so much that Linux from scratch will teach you about how real administration works.
About how Linux works.
About how Linux works. It's great.
So can I tell you guys something really quickly? My daughter just tooted on me.
It was a toot of excitement from Linux from scratch.
Just air, right?
It was a strong breath of air. This baby right here, red team baby.
So I feel old because whenever you said Linux from scratch, that's what we used to do back in the day. Now they call it from scratch or whatever, right? But at the end of the day, whenever you actually try to put Slackware,
man,
there was no package managers. There were,
I came from that world. I came from Slackware. It was.
But at the same time, you probably can do Linux from scratch and do Arch Linux instead of an easy one, and then you graduate.
Yeah. The big thing about Linux from scratch is maintaining everything, keeping everything patched and up to date. That's the nightmare. That's
why I went with Gentoo, because I was like, writing a package manager that's actually going to work is pretty difficult. And
Yeah.
Gentoo is basically Linux from scratch plus package manager.
So going back to the question of the automation, and what I'm doing is I'm repurposing some presentations that I already had, but at least I agree, Ansible is probably the bread and butter of everybody nowadays. Whoever is not using Ansible probably is missing out. But at the same time, there's so many out there, and Chris and me, we were joking the other day, is that, within the last 10 years, we at least have SaltStack, Chef, Puppet, Ansible, Terraform, Vagrant. I mean, the list goes on and on. So it's like changing underwords kind of, but they all have their own purpose, right?
Yeah, it is and it isn't. Terraform definitely has its place, and I guess we could talk about that a little later on. But yeah, I guess you're getting into Vagrant next. I happen to hate Vagrant. Sorry, I'll be the
I
the
love
counter person.
Vagrant.
I can't stand
I don't mind
Vagrant.
I love Vagrant. Get out of here, Chris. I love Vagrant.
I hate it.
Yeah, I don't mind Vagrant for small stuff, right? I mean, if
If you have anything that is remotely complex, forget it.
it's not complex at all.
Yeah.
Like actually, for instance, right now, you can get a Vagrant box from the official Kali one, and this is the one that I have for Websploit, the little VM that actually I use, right? And you can provision the whole thing, right? And a whole bunch of different networking, private networking, deploy a pfSense device, all in VirtualBox, super fast, and you don't even have to run, something like a Proxmox and so on, right? So I mean, it's okay. I mean, this is just a demo of
it does its job. Don't get me wrong. My big problem with Vagrant is I don't like Ruby.
Oh yeah.
Is that it?
Yes.
That it?
No. Not. There's just a few things, right? Every time I get in and I write any kind of Ruby, I feel dirty. There's all this magic. There's all these magic symbols that do all this crap that I have no idea what anything does. It's I'm more of a Python person, and I just don't like magic. I don't like more than one way. There should be one way to do things. And every time I get in to do Ruby, it always feels like Perl.
Perl is fun.
It's just Anyway,
I mean, to each their own. To each their own. That's fine. Like I've never done much in Ruby except for configuring Vagrant files. But I do want to call everyone's attention that we have Steve up in our chat here. Steve is one of the core contributors to Kali. He's also the guy that's responsible for getting Kali on WSL. Everyone, let's give
awesome.
Let's throw an F in the chat for Steve for being here.
Nice.
Welcome, Steve.
Nice. Thank you. You're actually helping my niece out quite a bit. She doesn't. I tried to get my niece into VirtualBox and to actually run some things, and she just has a real hard time doing it. So by getting Kali into WSL, you have no idea how many people you're opening this up to. People who are in high school that have never used a command line prompt in their life. And all of a sudden they could just type WSL and get a Kali box, get it installed, and start using the tools. It's just great.
People talking about Metasploit written in Ruby. I was actually just going to say, you don't like Ruby. Well, I hope you don't have to write any Metasploit modules yourself.
I don't like doing that either.
Last time I was looking at that, it was really hard to find documentation. I wonder if it's gotten better.
What do you like writing in, Chris?
I like writing. So I almost exclusively write in Python. I have to read a lot of C. I have to read a lot of
C.
I have to read a lot of Java code. But right now, I think Go is starting to grow on me. I'm really getting into that. Rust is incredibly terrifying. But I do want to learn Rust. I tried to get into Haskell for a little while. But yeah, mostly I've just gone back to Python. But what I thought was really funny is after I learned Haskell, I'm actually more of a functional programmer on Python. You can actually do functional programming on Python. And I just find myself doing it a lot more because I can do it like this. Boom, yeah, done.
List comprehensions are great fun.
Yeah, closures are one of the greatest things where you could just grab things like the environment as you had it at the time and then encapsulate everything. That's the big part.
That's cool. I'm trying to get into Rust as well. I'm doing it very slowly.
I can't stand the syntax. The syntax is I can't stand that with Rust.
It's not.
I don't know what
different.
about it.
It's not any different from like C or C++.
It's subtle differences which I don't like.
Man, y'all are just like
I also
you guys
like
in the
having
chat too. Like you guys are just so picky about things.
Oh yeah,
Like I don't like that shade of green. Like
yeah, when you've been around a little while, you just kind of get you'll get fixed in your ways, I guess.
I mean, Rust is cool, and like if people get good at Rust, that's great. It's just like that's not my language to go to. So like,
and that's fine.
Yeah.
That's fine. It's just funny. It's like
yeah,
it's like, you know what? I don't like shorts. I just don't like the wind on my legs.
Yeah.
I'm like, okay.
But what I would say to everybody though is just go learn all the stuff. At least try to play with things, and you'll see what the advantages are, the disadvantages are. My thing that I always got caught in with, with Vagrant was that it's so tied to the hip with VirtualBox. So if you wanted to use, I know you can do libvirt plugins and all kinds of things, but have you ever actually used them and kept them up? It's not fun. So I just, it is just tied to the hip virtual, and that's fine. I mean, that's the way it is. But my problem is that I'm too much of a networking person, too much of a networking geek. And so I like doing networks. And if it's more, if you get into things on VMware or VirtualBox that are more than host only networking or NAT, then, God help you. But it's,
yeah. I mean, everyone has their preferences just depending on like, what is their frame of references? What do they learn? What's the easiest thing for them to do? What speaks to them, right?
C and assembly.
Oh my God.
I would, what, I can read C, but I would never
Scheme
write
is also,
in it.
Scheme is really nice too. I really like Scheme.
Yeah, Cisco has something called Shea Scheme that they contributed to the whole community. If you've ever gotten into Scheme with Shea Scheme, it's supposed to be pretty nice. I think they're even doing something with Racket. Maybe there's like a Shea
Racket's
Racket.
Racket's a derivative of Scheme, yeah.
Yeah.
So I was like, have you ever done networking with Java? I'm not a fan of Java's networking libraries at all.
No.
Yeah, the thing is that everything has its place except Java.
Yeah, because Java's places everywhere.
Some development, kernel development, you're not gonna probably do that in Python, right? And if you're,
I mean, you could, in theory, if you really wanted to, you could hack it together.
You wanted to, but if you're gonna do it professionally, probably not. Yeah, and a lot of this is actually because of one, convenience and familiarity, and that's the reason that you pick a language or the other ones. And if you're getting started, my opinion, just because it's easier and it's everywhere, just start with Python. Like,
yeah,
it's a solid.
I mean, if you're going to be
choice
coding,
beginner.
Yeah. Start with Python, and then when you're ready to grow up a little bit, go to Go. One of the things that I really like about Go is the self-contained binaries, and I think Rust does the same thing. Basically, it spits out a statically linked binary. You don't have to worry about any dependencies. I mean, of course, they're bigger, but who cares? Disk space is cheap nowadays.
The problem with using Rust for kernel dev is you can't have everything in the nice little safe things or whatever. You have to have those unsafe blocks if you're doing kernel development in Rust.
Are you guys understanding what Jade's saying? She's saying that you can do anything in Rust. She believes in it. I mean, she's a bit young. She doesn't really understand the nuances, but she's pretty proficient. When she's not sitting on my lap, she's coding. But speaking of which, just to remind you guys, you do not need to know how to code in order to work on infrastructure. Now, if you want to work on infrastructure as code, I mean, that's a little bit different. I mean, that's stuff. Now we're talking about like Terraform. Now we're talking about Ansible as well, Chef, Puppet, all those things. Being able to define your infrastructure using some sort of language and being able to run that and be able to spin things up, tear things down, move things around, all that stuff. At my job currently, our SREs are all about Terraform. They are, if you cannot define it in Terraform, you cannot do it manually. You have to define everything in code, and we're using a repository in order to store all of those scripts. And then at any time that we need to run them, to either repeat another process, to spin up another thing, whatever that might be, it's all coming from Terraform. Nothing manual is done with our SREs. And I really like that approach. It adds more time, but in the long run, it actually reduces the amount of time for manpower, because everything is just done by computers, and computers are very predictable, whereas humans are not. Humans are not predictable.
One of the
Also,
things that
more consistent, and it doesn't introduce potentially security issues, right?
Right. Yeah. Computers only have security issues because we put them in there.
Yeah, I mean, Terraform also allows you to just basically, if you have a problem with something, let's say your environment is just totally screwed up, you don't know what's going on with it, you could just basically delete it, shoot it in the head and respin it up again. Terraform, one of the things that Terraform does really well is that as you have to add things to the environment, like let's say you're adding a virtual machine, you have a state file which says, okay, everything here has already been deployed to this point. Let's plan out what we need to change, what actually has to be different to be able to make the changes. And then it just does the differences. When we're going back to Ansible, one of the things Ansible does not do is it has very little state that is kept in Ansible. So it has facts, that basically you can go and discover IP addresses and, how many hard disks you have and those kinds of things. But it doesn't actually say, oh, I've already set up, send mail, or I've already set up postfix. I've got a mail server here. It actually, if you say, hey, I need to install postfix, what it does is it says, hey, server, do you have postfix installed? You don't? Okay, let's put it in and let's set it up. It actually has to ask that question every time you run it. And so it is a little bit slower.
All right. So we got another question in the chat. And I'm going to make commentary about this question after I ask it, but is it worth to set up a honeypot in the cloud? What are y'all's thoughts?
Yes.
I mean,
as long as it doesn't get out of control from you, if you know what you're doing, if you're going to invite somebody into your server and you're going to run, that's what I want to do. I want to play around with some honeypots. That'd be great.
Yeah,
it'd be fun. You can lead them on nice little adventures in your machine.
Yeah, you could even, it's almost like a goldfish bowl. You can invite them in and then, set up secure shell so that you can watch the sessions as they're typing. Unless, one of the problems with that is that I don't run any of these things, but from people that I've heard that do run it, you get a lot of just machines and just robotic traffic, and none of it's all that interesting. But if you can get some way of knowing, oh, this looks like this is a person that's actually typing at the prompt and they're exploring around, they're looking for data, I think that'd be fun.
Yeah, in the past, most of serious companies that are doing honeypots and everything for research, what they did is they bought unattributable spaces of blocks on the internet, and then they will put randomly, I won't say randomly, but they will put the honeypots and honeynets in there. Nowadays, I will say that everything that I see is in the cloud. They just get multiple pops, and I'm talking about not the typical AWS, Azure, everything that we're talking about in mostly US centric, but all over the world, right? Some in China, some so that way allows them to scale and not having to worry about some non-attributable space, and that is I don't know, can point back to whatever the research company that you're representing and so on. Now, if you're doing this for home, like for your own, not for a company, then why not, right? Just be aware that you're going to be paying, you're going to be paying money, right? So if you want to do a big honeynet, then you're probably not going to do it with a free tier, right? In most of the providers.
You'd have to sign up for a lot of free tier.
Another one. Yeah.
One of the ideas that I thought was really neat is I know a group that's doing a complete honey net, and the honey net is overlaid over their production network. So if your behavior looks out of the ordinary and they know for sure that it's probably malicious, they'll stick you on this alternate dimension that looks exactly like the same production network, but unknown to you, when you're doing a bunch of Nmap scans, oh, gee, there's 40,000 ports open on this machine. What am I supposed to go after? Oh my God. In other words, they're actually gaslighting the attackers. I think it's pretty hilarious, but yeah.
That's some like next level. Like that's pretty cool.
I think
have to
that is
admit.
I think that is probably the next level of blue teaming, is basically having some way of, putting this alternate reality in place over your network where, if it looks like it's malicious, then just stick them in that and let them go, fidget around for a while in it.
Just let them go ham, and you'll see like they'll come across top secret documents.zip, and they'll download that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that
Put all
right
kinds
there
of
is like
tokens and things.
it's the Saddam Hussein of networks. Like he has a bunch of body doubles. Like, is this the real Saddam? I don't know, but let's check. Let's see. Dead
Does he
Cat
have
Lady.
the birthmark?
Dead Cat Lady asks, how useful are SWE skills for security roles in general? So I'm guessing SWE is software engineering.
I think so.
Or social warrior enterprise.
Probably not that one.
Yeah, probably not that one.
Yeah,
But
most definitely software engineering.
are they useful for security roles in general? I'm going to say yes. If you can, in terms of like software engineering, what kind of goes into that? It's not just knowing how to code. It's understanding how computers work. It's understanding how networks work. If your applications are going to be communicating across the net, it's an understanding of computer limitations. It's an understanding of different types of like web-based attacks, like SQL injections, talking about cross-site scripting, all those different things. So having that, oh my God, it's so hard to think with this baby on my side. It's definitely helpful, but it depends on like where in security that you want to go. If you are a really good coder and you want to go in network security, it's a little bit less effective of a skill. Whereas if you want to be an application security analyst or an application security professional, having software engineering skills is really high in demand. Like that, those are the types of things that you'll need to know, because you need to understand how to read code, how to assess code, how to identify vulnerabilities in the code by reading it, by looking at reports, all those types of things. That's going to be really useful.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things also you learn is you learn all the soft skills that'll all go along with it, right? I mean,
that's true.
You're probably going to know how to, to write a spec. You're going to know how to, communicate that information. You're going to know there's all kinds of these soft skills that go along with being a software engineer, and how those get brought into security as well. Sorry, Omar, the other Omar, didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, not at all. No. Basically, I think that you guys hit a couple of things that are very, very relevant. One is that security is so big, right? Depending on where you're going in security, that answer is maybe yes or no.
Yeah.
Or it may be. The short answer is yes. It will help a lot. For example, if you're thinking about doing forensics and do reverse engineering on some type of malware, and that malware is created in C, and you don't even know what C structures are, then probably you're gonna run into a lot of problems, right? The same thing with assembly, and as Omar mentioned, the architecture, the protocols, that's where you actually have to focus on, understanding whether you're in offensive or defensive security, right? How things operate, so then you can even break it or protect it, right? For web applications, if you're going to go into web application hacking and so on, of course, become familiar with not only with the programming languages, but also the frameworks that are there, the authentication schemes. How do you do single sign-on? What are the methodologies, for doing that in code, right? And what are the deficiencies, right? For SAML and OpenID Connect. It goes on and on. It goes on and on. But at the end of the day, if you're actually just getting started, I will say that probably do two things. Get exposed to some programming language. That's probably Python, right? And then get exposed to networking as well. You do have to know a little bit of networking for a lot of things in security, right? So the answer is yes, but it also depends, right? So if you're going to go to social engineering, you probably don't have to go into any of that, right? But for the most part, or most of the technical stuff, both in the offensive and defensive, you do have to have some type of programming experience.
It's also not too bad for getting started with network programming. The libraries are pretty good for that.
Yeah. Well, on the networking side, it's not just the networking programming. It's also knowing how to use Wireshark, knowing how to use TCP dump, T-Shark, being able to, if you could even do things like looking at the LSA, the Link State Advertisement Database in OSPF or ISIS, and know exactly what networks are connected where they're located, how much bandwidth is between different sites. You can glean a lot of this information out of an enterprise network just by watching things go by.
T-Shark is definitely worth learning, because there was some neat tricks that I was able to use T-Shark for. I had to grab little bits and pieces from a bunch of different packets that would just been absolutely painful to do in the Wireshark GUI.
Mm-hmm. There's all kinds of like field extraction that you can do, and break out with T-Shark. It's really useful.
Yeah, talking about, actually, I just saw Master Troll saying Scapy is good. Scapy is the best thing in the world.
Scapy is amazing. You can actually capture things and replay them back, modify things, extract fields. We even have, since I work for Cisco, we have a whole bunch of proprietary protocols, and what we do? We implement them in Scapy if we ever have to attack them or fuzz them or do anything like that. I mean, Scapy has a little bit of built-in fuzzing, but it's okay. But yeah, if you have to break out a really complex protocol, one of the things you can do in like Wireshark is you can write dissectors in Lua to break out a protocol, but you can't make them. You can't assemble the packets after you've broken them down or rebuild them back up again. And Scapy allows you to do that. And
yeah, it's a really great Python library.
Yeah. That cat lady just asked exactly that. That makes sense. Do you ever build your own tools? Absolutely.
Yeah. That's half the fun.
Yeah, sometimes they can be really simple, just a tool that does just one thing for me, and that's all I need it to do. Sometimes it can get a little bit more complicated, like 2 things I need it to do.
Yeah,
God forbid 3.
I could never imagine sharing a lot of the tools that I develop with anybody, because
they're absolute trash.
I'm not that good of a software engineer. I could read code. I can break things down. I can look at the levels of abstraction, but I'm not very good developer. I mean, maybe that's one of the reasons why I'm in security.
CTFs are a lot of fun for developing tools, because I'll find myself doing the same thing over and over again. So I'll have one tool that I expand upon and make better, and eventually I'll have a hopefully nice working piece of software. Hey
Chris, I know you said you didn't really like coding that much, but have you heard of Ruby? Because it can really help you become a better developer.
Sure.
So if you don't know what Scapy is, because I'm also a Scapy fanboy, and since I have the Zoom share, I can do whatever. But that is actually something that to follow up with the question of creating tools and everything. Absolutely. Give me 1 second. Oskari is requesting remote control of your screen. No.
Hell no.
Yeah. But if you actually, are not familiar with Scapy, that's actually something that I will definitely recommend as a homework for today. And it's super easy, right? Just as an interactive shell in here using IPython. You can do things like...
Yeah, do you see that? You see that thing at the bottom where it says using IPython? Don't try to use Scapy without it, because IPython makes it so much better. It does the command, completion and all that other stuff. So yeah, definitely do make sure. I think when you have a recent version of Kali, it does it now automatically. But before, it was not that way. You had to have it installed first before it ever worked. But yeah, anyway.
No, I completely agree.
Yeah,
and then the other thing is that, again, what I did in there is basically just ls parentheses, and you see all the different built-in protocols and type of constructs that you can actually make in a packet from layer 2 all the way to layer 7, right? And the cool thing about this is actually you can do exactly the same thing, right? Just put TCP, and if you want to mess with specific TCP layer 4 fields, you can actually do that. You can collect packet captures, replay them. A lot of the things. So what I do for a living is I investigate all the bad news whenever it comes to vulnerabilities for Cisco and the industry, and some cases, for protocols that are broken. Let's say if TCP is broken, or what WPA is broken, or whatever the case might be, right? Specific fields. I get, I create whatever recreate. We could actually just say recreate, right? Basically, put them in the lab, making sure that we can exploit that vulnerability, and then from there, basically, I just create a Python, Scapy script that people actually can use it to reproduce the issue to give it to developers to then, of course, fix the underlying problem, right? So from things like that to collect packet captures, a lot of people actually even use it for creating their own, as Chris mentioned, potentially fuzzers. It's a little bit hard, right? You use other tools to do that, right? But at least you have the construct of the packet. You can actually export that packet and then do a mutational fuzzer with either Adamsa or Unity, actually, which is a couple of colleagues of ours, created this fuzzer called Unity that allows you to actually, do this mutational fuzzing using pickups as well. So there's so many applicabilities. Another one that I'm actually a fanboy in that GitHub repository that I pasted in the chat. I have a whole bunch of Scapy scripts for your reference, like creating your own scanners, creating your own sniffer, put them into a Scapy environment, and then changing those packets and replaying them out. All that is in there. So, anyways, back to you, Chris.
Oh, okay.
Back to you, Chris, with the weather.
Yeah. So another thing that Scapy does that a lot of people probably don't know, these things called answering machines in them, where you can have it so that it starts like a process, almost like a thread in the background, where it's waiting for certain things to come in and then it'll respond right away with something, which might, in some cases you have to get the device into a state. You have to do this exchange, and I'm not just talking about a TCP three-way handshake. You have to do a lot more than that to get it into a point where you could actually do the fuzzing or do the exploit. And in Scapy has all of these things for doing things like finite state machines that you can get into it really deeply and really. We had I wish I had a way of sharing this with you. I actually have a very old security vulnerability where we had to basically code the entire thing in Scapy to get it to a point where you could actually get on the network and take over a whole bunch of routers with it. It was really pretty neat.
Whoa.
Yeah. But it's a system that's not really used as much anymore.
Very cool. What other questions do we have in the chat?
I heard that I'm a gem. Thank you.
Ruby gem.
Yeah. Nice.
Yeah, that's their package manager, by the way, for anybody that didn't catch that.
Yeah.
I don't see any other questions, and we've been talking for an hour and a half.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that we're probably
ready to call it a night.
close it. Yeah.
So you guys ready to get into some Fortnite or what? Just kidding.
I'm ready to get Anycast working with Kubernetes, the Kube API server. That's what I'm working on right now. I've got a fair. I mean, it's not complex for the complexity's sake. I'm trying to figure out how to make a very high available bare metal Kubernetes cluster is what I'm trying to do. Most of the things that you do when you're doing Kubernetes, they usually assume you'll have one master and then you'll have a whole bunch of minions, a whole bunch of worker nodes that are doing the things.
Right.
But when you run it in things like AWS, you'll have a very high availability control plane. And there's all this really neat stuff in Kubernetes. If you just have if you're getting into Kubernetes, like to start with, I would do something like, there's these things where you can run them on your machine. But if you're ready to like grow up from that, there are things like K3s or keys to do things on Raspberry Pis. But I'm using full-blown Kubernetes with KubeSpray, KubeSpray is Ansible for Kubernetes. If you didn't know about that, that allows you to set up an Ansible cluster using, or a Kubernetes cluster using Ansible. And anyway, I'm trying to figure out how to use that and how to make it really highly available using IP Anycast, which is you have one IP address and it can go to multiple machines, and whichever machine grabs it, takes it, and makes your request. That's what I'm working on right now.
So there are a couple of new questions coming in. One is what is software-defined networking? That's actually probably the easiest. And then the other one, what is the best way to lock down a VM so exploits can escape? So we probably can define software-defined networking. Basically, is a lot of automation, right? But basically, having a controller that can potentially, well, not potentially, it will completely configure, manage, and deploy your network components, both in software and also the hardware components as well.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I kind of like it. Software-defined network, SDN, software-defined networking means a lot of things to a lot of people. But one of the things you can do when you really implement SDN is you can take an entire network, pick it up and shift it, and then re-implement it again. You may have the same IP addressing, or you may not. It may have the same kind of topology. It may not. It basically allows all that setup and automates all that setup. There was a question on here also. What do we recommend for Cisco emulation? There's GTS? What is it called? GTS3?
GNS3.
GNS3. That's the
matter of
free.
fact,
That's the free one.
I was streaming a presentation right before this one, so the video may be actually already processing here. There was a class that was actually delivered through the Red Team Village last week in DEF CON, and we had Lee actually going over GNS3 and how to actually deploy for both defensive and offensive techniques. So check that out. And I think that you also have used, I don't know what it's actually called now, but before
it was called Viral before, right? Yeah. If you have $200 to burn, it's called Cisco Modeling Labs, CML, and they just came out with the new version 2.0, and 2.0 is impressive. It's really, really nice. So if you guys who are on the CML team are watching this, real kudos to you, because what you used to have to do is they had this Java application that you used to use to manage all of your routers and manage all your network. And they've all brought that over into, HTML5, and they made it all really, really nice. But one of the things that's really great about CML that's really worth the money, the $200, is one, they have Cloud Init built into it. So you can set up all your VMs using Cloud Init that you have in the environment. You have all of these different kinds of routers and switches. They have Nexus switches. They have iOS XR, which is what is used to run the internet. There are multi-million-dollar machines that are in service providers today. You could just use that. You just spin it up. You have an instance of iOS XR. You could set up BGP. You can set up all these really interesting, crazy things, and you can do arbitrary topologies. And that CML is what I would recommend if you can afford it.
That's wild.
Yeah. So for those of you who are security testers, take a look at it, because maybe we can get some people looking at some of this code and maybe even make it more secure. It's there. It's really cheap. It's the same code that you'll see on really expensive boxes.
So let's answer that other question, which is, what is the best way to lock down a VM so exploits can't escape? And I think I'll start with that one. Make sure there's no networking on that VM. Like it can't access your host, and it cannot access your, in terms of just simple networking, it cannot access the outside internet. Yeah. That would be one way of doing it. Also, I would imagine you'd want to use a more, not necessarily like an open source hypervisor, but I would want to use something that's more supported. So it will have security updates to prevent any sort of VM escape. But from you guys, from your perspective, what types of malware have you seen that have been able to go up against a hypervisor and escape the VM?
Yeah. And actually, I guess I'm repurposing slides or whatever here just for talking points because I cannot focus. But one of the things that I want to actually clarify is that exploits will leave, right? It's not the exploit itself. I assume that you're actually talking about whenever you're doing malware analysis, what are the best practices on where you're going to store the malware, how you're going to connect it to the network or not, what type of sandboxing you're going to be using, what are the best practices to even use sinkholing to actually segregate the traffic, because it's not so much of the purpose of malware analysis is so you can analyze it, so you know what it's actually doing, right? So if you're actually not going to have a way that is going to communicate two things, then it defeats the purpose, right? So the first thing that I do recommend Never do this in your computer.
Nice.
Never do this in the
Nice.
work computer. Don't do this in the computer that you're actually watching Twitch or your Facebook account or Twitter and everything else. Just do a segregated computer. And at the end of the day, what Omar was actually mentioning is malware, modern malware will know a lot of things about if they're running in a sandbox or if they're running in a VM or if they're running in a container. They look for things like mouse movements, right? They also look for things in your clipboard, whether you actually have not put stuff in the clipboard or not. They look for color changes in the foreground and the background to see if you're moving windows around. They actually look for, of course, active windows and to see if there's a lot of hard drive activity or not, right? Now, what most people do, and I'm not going to go into a whole bunch of these, right? But what most people do, let me go right here, is that they use a sandbox, right? And this sandbox, what it is VMs, right? At the end of the day, if you actually look at it. And let me get my annotations ready real quick. Give me 1 second. And what it is that you can have something like this. You have all your guest machines, which are the ones that basically are going to be hosting the malware. And then what you're seeing here is basically based on Cuckoo, which is the Cuckoo sandbox is probably one of the most popular out there, and it's free. And basically what it does is segregates, those VMs that you're running the active malware, and then you actually have a host which actually manages those. So you're not connecting to the exact VMs, that is running malware. You have a virtual switch, and in there, since it's a virtual switch, you can actually have a virtual network that you can actually act as a sinkhole. And then from a sinkhole, you can actually analyze what the malware is doing. Is it trying to communicate to a command and control box over a specific DNS name? And if it is, you can actually probably do your own tools to listen to the conversation and impersonate that domain to see what's actually the beacons are actually going out, right? Or you can replicate parts of the internet, right? Like respond to any IP addresses in there and see what the malware is actually doing, right? In some cases, you probably, if the malware is actually trying to do a lateral movement, you can put a web service that is running in every single port out there, right? And there's a lot of really nifty small utilities with Python that you can actually do that. You just have a listener for everything, and then you start actually collecting that information and then send it over to whether it's this Cuckoo host or another VM that you have in your environment. So that's what I would recommend. Do not put in your VM in your laptop. Do not put it in your work laptop. Just get some dedicated old PC. Definitely, don't have to spend a lot of money, or a small Intel NUC, and start playing with that. Right?
What kind of a hypervisor is Cuckoo based on? Is it still using KVM?
KVM.
It is using KVM.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, because I had a chance to really play with it all that much. If I ever needed to do any of this kind of analysis, I made my own environment. But this looks really nice, especially if you could just say, hey, these domain names, rather than giving them the real IP address, give them a fake one. And then if they try to connect to it and communicate with it, you probably could do even things like, if they're not checking TLS certificates, you could just have it create certificates on. That sounds like that's really useful.
Yes.
I will say that when I'm doing any kind of analysis where I'm really worried about the software, I mean, you would also do exactly what Omar said, but keep in mind that a lot of the container escapes, hypervisor escapes are really few and far between.
It's really hard to do.
It's really super hard to do. And I mean, you're talking, if you can get a real consistent one that works all the time, that's like at least, $50 or maybe even $100,000 that would be worth. I mean, that would probably be worth even more than that. If it's on ESXi and, which a lot of businesses depend on, and, if you can get access, like root access to the ESXi host from that, I mean, that's like big time money that those things are really worth. So they're kind of rare. And what I found more than anything, when things are escaping, they're just escaping through the network somehow. Or, where hypervisor stuff gets really interesting is where they have things like virtual hardware. And, it's the drivers for those virtual hardware are sometimes affected. And that's usually where the escapes happen. But like I said, it's very rare.
Yeah, there was some question in here, kind of shifting gears, because this is an ad hoc stream that basically we just pulled it up out of thin air. We were talking on Discord and said, "Hey, you want to stream this weekend? Sure. Okay. Are you available? Sure. So let me set up a Zoom and actually stream the thing." So a lot of so a couple of people here were asking about a schedule. We don't have a schedule. We probably are not going to do but we're working on something that I guess that I'm disclosing now. What we're trying to do is probably keep the momentum.
No, don't do it.
Yeah.
I need to invest in some equipment, all the
And
fancy
memes.
stuff, and I've just got headphones.
Omar, a memes channel, right?
Yeah.
Oh my God.
The memes channel.
And the memes channel.
No, but basically what we're trying to do
Security
is probably have every other weekend or so some talk. This one is so completely ad hoc, but if we were thinking about doing a call for papers, right? So if you actually have a specific topic that you actually want to go, and even though this is a red team village and it's all about offensive security, but anything related to cybersecurity, right? How do you study for things? Certifications, specific tools that you have created, and keep the momentum, because once a year we get together because of DEF CON, but now we're all virtual, so might as well keep the momentum and the conversation. And it's free.
That was one of the nice things about DEF CON is, I mean, at least it extends more participation than we ever had before. It doesn't matter where you are. You can be in Cyprus, or you can be in Turkey, or you can be anywhere, Ukraine, and you can participate in these things.
I wonder if there was anyone from Antarctica.
They're probably not doing offensive security in Antarctica. I don't think that's part of their research.
Are they watching Twitch over Antarctica satellite?
Satellite internet.
Satellite internet.
They get the stream an extra 30 seconds later than the rest of the world.
They have a telnet session going to a server that's in Moscow, and they're in there. You type a key and it shows up 5 seconds or 10 seconds later. Yay!
No, but I think it would be a really good idea for us to like what Omar was saying. The other Omar, I am one Omar, also known as Propaganda Panda 4 on Twitter, or rather Propaganda Panda 4 on Twitch. I think it'd be really cool to have this on a regular basis. Maybe not every weekend, maybe every other weekend. But what Omar has also been doing is that he has been streaming meetups and meetup talks. Since everything is virtual, we have, where I'm from, there's a few cybersecurity groups. I'm sure where you guys are, like, there's probably a ton of them. I mean, Maryland area, right?
Me.
Yeah, we actually have DEF CON groups. And I think that it's actually probably Zoom, but hopefully it's not my bandwidth actually going bad. There's a lot of rain outside, but you cut off a little bit. But yeah, we have DEF CON groups, so we can actually get involved. We have a lot of local folks also in my area that we probably can stream as well. It will be amazing to actually build a community like that.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we have the Red Team Village to join and take part in the conversations, meet new people, learn new things, get resources, get connected, and just be a good citizen. First and foremost, be a good citizen, but help someone out, and someone else will help you too. So we really want to have that community vibe. We really want people to encourage people to help other people.
Absolutely.
Yes.
All right. So I think that that's it for today. We've been streaming for 2 hours now, and thank you again, everybody. And actually, thank you, Omar, Chris, and Oskari, for your time today.
Yeah, this was a lot of fun. I love doing this.
And join our Discord channel, right? Your Discord server, right? And everything is on the bottom of the screen, right? The website, the Discord channel, the Discord server, and we have tons of people there. We have close to 9,000 security professionals there, communicating on a daily basis. So with that said, thank you and have a good day.
Thank you all.
Y'all take care.